Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Okay, we don't have to keep going. That belongs in the museum.
That belongs in the museum. What's up, everybody? You are listening to the Command Zone. We don't belong in the museum. I'm your host, Jimmy Wong.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Quiet. Speak for yourself.
Yeah. Guys, Josh is actually 16. He just has never revealed it. He's an incredibly successful 16-year-old. How you guys all doing today? We are going to have a very fun episode. First off, we have a Modern Masters 2017 preview card for you all, and we're also doing a double deck tech for the Game Nights episode that just came out.
Yeah, super exciting. So, well, first, we should talk about our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/commandzone.
Yeah.
Speaking of Modern Masters 2017, that's the place to go right now to pre-order all of your products, singles, everything. They were going to have it to you as fast as possible and in the best condition.
Yeah.
How much of this stuff are you getting?
I mean, considering what I know what our preview card is, I'm probably going to get a lot of stuff because our preview card, we're Commander players. I'm very excited about this. I actually don't own a copy of it.
I don't either, so...
Soon.
Soon.
Also, very fun. Card Kingdom had a contest where if you pre-ordered a box of Ether Revolt, you were entered to win every single masterpiece from Ether Revolt. And one of our listeners was the lucky winner.
One of our listeners won one of every masterpiece from Ether Revolt.
That's insane.
Yeah, Card Kingdom let us know that. And we're like, holy crap, we won't call out the person's name. It's kind of like when you win the lottery and everybody you know is calling you asking for money. I'm sure everyone's calling this person asking for masterpieces.
To borrow his masterpieces, yeah.
So...
yeah, that's awesome. So Card Kingdom, awesome sponsor. Make sure you check it out, cardkingdom.com/commandzone. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/commandzone. These are the people that help make our show possible, including the Game Nights episode that just came out, and we've pledged to shout one out every single episode. This episode, it is...
Preston Jackson.
Yeah.
Preston, you rock.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson. You are for real. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Okay, so we're going to have a special intro for our Modern Master spoiler here because we're linking people over at this very time code right now. Hey guys, it is exciting time for here at the Command Zone. We are going to preview our Modern Masters 2017 spoiler, but make sure that you also check out Game Nights Episode 4. It just came out on our channel. It's live gameplay of Commander, and we have a ton of giveaways in it.
Yeah, you can win stuff, so that's the real reason to go watch it.
So after you check out our preview card, make sure you go check that out for a ton of free swag that you could win, and also to check out our brand new series if you want to see this Commander gameplay in action, because this card is a Commander card from Modern Masters 2017.
By some estimation, we learned this because of our last episode, considered the single most powerful Commander among competitive multiplayer EDH players. It's at the top of the Tier 1 list. All right, take it away, Jimmy.
The card is... ZUR the Enchanter.
It ZUR is.
It's how long have we waited to make that one?
I've been holding that the whole episode.
So this is incredibly exciting. This card is a very, very great card for Commander, obviously. It's an incredibly powerful card. So let's read it. It is 1 white, blue, and black. That would be Esper colors for a 1/4 flying legendary creature human wizard. When ZUR the Enchanter attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with converted mana cost 3 or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you do, shuffle your library. Woo!
So it tutors and then cheats something into play. We can see why this is extremely powerful. The card I think that gets mentioned the most with ZUR is Necropotence, which is just lets you draw as many cards as you want at the cost of 1 life each.
Yeah.
And so ZUR often is just kind of an engine to get Necropotence out. It's almost like having Necropotence as your commander.
Yeah.
And then you're in the situation where you just have as many cards as you want all the time. And usually from there, ZUR goes into any one of a number of combos because you're drawing so many cards you can find combo pieces.
Yeah, so the turn after you play ZUR, or whenever you're able to swing with him, you basically have Necropotence out, and then you can usually combo off and win the game that turn.
Yeah.
So a lot of decks use Laboratory Maniac. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards, you win the game instead. And then they'll use cards like Doomsday to reduce the number of cards in your library. And then these decks will also play a lot of counter spells and
To protect their combo.
protect the combo, yeah.
I think even if you don't build ZUR as like a super competitive deck, it's just an extremely powerful card because there are so many enchantments that sort of fit this bill. You can sort of get toolboxy because you can get like Rest in Peace, Grasp of Fate, which is a really good card. It's kind of like an O-ring for all of your opponents. Those are, and Rest in Peace, sorry, is a graveyard hate card, and just the ability to sort of respond to what's necessary at the table because you're playing against a deck that's using its graveyard. Well, you can just shut that off right now with one attack from ZUR.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, that kind of flexibility is very powerful, even if you're not building one of these super hyper competitive combo-y decks.
Yeah, and it's 3 or less, so there's a lot of different ways for you to get this out there. I mean, you can do a 1-mana enchantment, 2-mana enchantment. Obviously, Rest in Peace is huge. Necropotence.
Necropotence is the one, though, yeah.
But even like Oblivion Ring to just get something off the table. Notably, this is the first real reprint of ZUR the Enchanter since Cold Snap.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it's a Judge foil as well, but otherwise it is just...
Yeah, this card is actually not super cheap. I think it's in the $10 range-ish. So it's a boon to Commander players that they're reprinting it here in Modern Masters. I mean, obviously that price is going to go down now because it's rare. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily the easiest card to just go out and get. So
yeah, I mean, you could get an oversized version of it from Commander's Arsenal, I think. Yeah, but this card's great. You can now have access to it in foil as well because every Modern Masters pack comes with a foil card in there. So this is really exciting. And for me, what this says about Modern Masters is potentially going to be a lot of 3-color archetypes because we already know Stoic Angel is on the packaging for the set.
Interesting. Do you think maybe we'll get like Tri-lands? And oh my god, I hope so because those are my favorite. Jimmy.
First pick Tri-land?
No, don't get excited. Don't get excited. Don't get excited.
I mean, someone else is screaming, Fetch lands! They're going to reprint Fetch lands.
I'd be very surprised if Fetch lands are in the set because why not just save it for a fall
Standard
set or a
set,
standard? Yeah. Although I don't know. I've heard a lot of conflicting reports, but it sounds like there's going to be quite a bit of this one printed, and I think the price point's already a little bit lower than the last one. So
great. I have a lot of fun drafting the Modern Masters sets. It obviously makes a lot of cards for Commander players also go down in price, so that's a great thing all around.
All right, on to our normal, regularly scheduled programming. And we'll be talking more about Modern Masters, I'm sure, in the next few weeks.
Yeah. And the decks that we're breaking down today, if you're still with us after hearing our Modern Masters preview card, were the ones that were played on Game Nights episode 4. So if you haven't seen that yet, we'll say it again. Go check it out first so you can watch the episode, watch how they play, and then come back to this episode, or do the opposite order, doesn't matter, and find out what the decks are and how they work and how we built them.
Yeah, we'll try not to get too spoilerific. So on this episode of Game Nights, what we decided to do is we mandated that everybody was going to play with one of the new monocolored... Actually, we didn't say monocolored. One of the new legendaries from E3 Volt. So Hope of Gearpor is the reason we didn't say monocolored. Somebody could have chose that. Jimmy, you demanded to play mono red.
Heck yeah.
To no one's surprise.
To no one's surprise.
Yeah.
It didn't do awesomely, but the deck was a lot of fun. And the deck can have a lot of explosive starts. I unfortunately didn't get to see any of those in this game.
And then our friend Vinny, he played the Yahenni deck, which was also very cool. And I played Rishkar, Pima Renegade. This is the second episode of Game Nights in a row where I had to play a mono green general. We didn't really want to do Baral, so because that was kind of my other choice.
Yeah.
So I went with Rishkar because Baral is just not going to engender the type of gameplay that's going to be super fun to watch. Like I counter this, I counter that, I counter this, and nobody's doing anything. And then our friend Wes played Sram or SRAM. Or SRAM.
SRAM.
Yeah, is what it really is. Senior Edificer. So the two decks we're going to talk about on this episode are Rishkar and SRAM. And Rishkar because it's my deck that I played, and SRAM because it was the coolest deck of the 4.
By far the coolest deck.
Yeah.
Although I would say that yours comes in a close second, and even Vinny's too. Mine was just, it had a monkey in it, so.
I actually put it at the top of the list because it's got monkey. And
yeah,
you can therefore make monkey noises while playing the deck.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to start with Rishkar, Pima Renegade. Rishkar is 2 and a green for a legendary creature, Elf Druid. The elf part is kind of important. He's a 2/2. When Rishkar enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. And then it says, each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has tap, add green to your mana pool.
Whoa.
So when Rishkar comes out, if you have another creature, at least one other, you can put a counter on Rishkar and a counter on that other creature. And then as long as Rishkar's out, anything with a 1/1 counter is kind of a land war elf. So it ramps you, it makes your guys grow bigger also, which I think is something people don't think about as much.
Mm-hmm. If you have two creatures that are already on the battlefield from the prior turn, they can immediately tap for mana because they're not summoning sick as well. So
that's a good point. So sometimes you can play Rishkar and still have 2 mana and do something else and just have really explosive turn 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about it? Is it powerful?
Yeah, I think in a vacuum, it's the most powerful of the legendary creatures from Ether Revolt. Yahenni might be in that conversation. Mm-hmm. But I think Rishkar is it's very easy to see. And
for Commander specifically, too, because you're ramping with it. And that's a huge part of the game, especially for green.
I would generally say that if you see a group of commanders and you don't know which one's the most powerful, it's generally going to be at least among the ones that have either card draw or ramp on them. Mm-hmm. And, or they tutor or do one of the other broken things about our game, or they cheat stuff into play. But we didn't have those kind of things. Sram is the other one, has card draw. So, of course, we're talking about that one. So why did I choose to play this deck is the next question. Well, I chose last. So I had Baral, Rishkar, or Hope of Girapur. And, I chose Rishkar in this case.
It's a good choice.
I could have chose Hope of Girapur.
I've never actually played against a monocolored, a colorless.
I played against a couple colorless decks at GPs. I think they're cool, but they're hard to build, and you have to have a lot of the pieces, right? So I just wasn't confident in my ability to put that together in the time that we had, before we had to start shooting. So those are the real life logistics of how things work, people.
Josh has to sit there and be like, dang it, I have to build a whole new deck around this card that I wasn't planning on building around. I did tell you to take apart some of your old Marchesa 5-color deck. Too. Because there's so many cards in there that want +1/+1 counters, like Gyre Sage and stuff. So
I was very hesitant to take apart old decks, but you were right, because I just took pictures of what I took out, and then I could slot them back in.
Have you?
I haven't yet. So
it's been a month.
Yeah. Well, I've been busy cutting game nights.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the plan?
The plan for the deck was to put the 1/1 counters on a bunch of creatures. So I have a bunch of creatures that tap for mana. So now that I have a lot of mana, and most of the cards in the deck sort of put +1/+1 counters on stuff, I do that until I use the extra mana to put more +1/+1 counters on, and then at a certain point, all my stuff's big enough that I don't need them for mana anymore. I can just attack with them. So that's kind of not super revolutionary, but that was the general idea.
Yeah.
Let's look at the stats.
Someone asked us where that came from. It just comes from watching a lot of Sports Center and like similar-esque shows.
Zone.
Yeah, from the Pwn Zone. Like the whole idea of just like, it's the ridiculous thing. Oh, it's stats. You want to know more.
So there are 12 mana ramp cards in the deck. And I was actually surprised when I put the stats together because Rishkar is mana ramp on a stick, I wouldn't have thought that I would have so much, but I'm just addicted to ramp, so there's a lot. Card draw, 13.
Hey.
So a ton.
Mono green, too.
Yeah.
That's good.
That was a big thing because Rishkar is scary in the way that you have to play it, which is you have to put a lot of stuff on the board because you need to turn that stuff into mana dorks that you can tap for mana, but then you're kind of exposing yourself to, board wipes and things like that. Mm-hmm. So the way to mitigate that is to use some of that mana to draw cards so that if the bad thing happens and your board gets wiped, you're not like way down in cards.
Yeah.
Because that's the worst, right? You play all your mana rocks, you have a ton of mana, now you don't have anything to do with the mana, because somebody just killed a couple of them and you're just like, okay, I just got a top deck, draw this and hope it's good.
Yeah, and green doesn't have that much card draw too. It has a ton of ramp obviously, but not as much card draw, so that's pretty smart.
Single target removal, there's 8, which is high. A lot of it is on creatures. So there's things like Duplicant and World Breakers and stuff. Board wipes, there's only 2. This is just a problem with green. There's just not a ton.
The Great Aurora, come on.
Yeah, I didn't want to play the Great Aurora. So there's like Azuri's Predation and Bane of Progress. I counted it in that category.
I mean, Bane of Progress is just an amazing card anyway. So
yeah. So the deck, we're gonna get into a breakdown of sort of how the deck works here. There was 2 realizations I had about the deck when I was building it. One is that you're gonna play Rishkar on turn 3 basically every game. On turn 3, that means on turn 3, you need a creature to already be on the board. Mm-hmm. Because if you play Rishkar and can only put 1/1/1 counter out, you're very sad. So it's very important that the deck plays either a 1-drop or a 2-drop. The problem you run into if you start doing sort of the usual suspects of green 1 and 2 drops is if you play Birds of Paradise, Landwar Elves, that kind of stuff. If you happen to get 2 of them and you play a 1-drop then a 2-drop, you're only going to get a counter on maybe one of those, or not Rishkar himself. And also those cards aren't very good when you draw them later. So I was looking for a bunch of creatures that cost very little that either A, were very good or were still good if you draw them later in the game, and B, could sort of get their own counters, so that if I happen to get 2, then one of them got its own counter, and then Rishkar gets a counter, and he puts a counter on the other one. Because I didn't also want to be in the situation where I play a 1-drop, play a 2-drop, play Rishkar, only can put 2 counters out, and now only of my 3 creatures, only 2 of them have counters. So I was trying to mitigate that. So the first category is called Curve Out.
Curving out.
So this is something I talked about in the Commander Summit episode that I've been moving towards a lot more in my deck building, which is the idea of curving out. And this just sort of took it to even the next level, because there's a lot more sort of 1 and 2 drops in this deck.
Yeah.
The first one's a really good card in the deck.
Yeah, you played this in the game, and everyone turned and looked at it and went, "Whoa, this card's perfect."
We do 2 games and game nights, and it filled both roles that it's supposed to fill in the deck. So in one game, I got it out on turn 1, and the other one, I got it out on like turn 10.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, we should read the card. Go ahead.
It is Endless One. It's an Eldrazi from Battle for Zendikar that costs X mana. And Endless One is very simple. It's a 0/0 that enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So this card is literally always on curve.
Yep.
From turn 1. It's not like Walking Ballista or whatever that has XX in it. You can play this on turn 1 as a 1/1, and it also taps for mana immediately as a 1/1, which means that if you play another creature turn 2 and then Rishkar, you can actually have 3 creatures immediately that tap for mana.
Yeah, exactly.
Or except for Rishkar, sorry, because he has something sick.
As long as Rishkar's out, Endless One is a mana dork. But also, Endless One fits that bill of like, once you have a ton of mana and you don't really care if you create another mana dork, well, then you can make Endless One like a 15/15, and then that's good for you because, it's a 15/15.
Pretty smart.
Similarly, not quite on the same spectrum, but it fits the same bill, is Experiment 1, which is 1 green mana for a human ooze. It's a 1/1, but it has Evolve. So Evolve says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So Experiment 1 is a 1/1, but if you play anything that's a 1/1 or bigger, it gets a 1/1 counter.
It's greater, so it has to be 2/2 or bigger.
It could be a 1/2 or a 2/1.
Yeah, exactly. That's the cool part about it.
Yeah, so it's guaranteed when Rishkar comes in to get that other counter, because Rishkar's a 2/2. So your Experiment 1 played on turn 1 is going to be really good. Now, it's less good later, but it can still grow. It can still do its own thing. It also says remove 2 +1/+1 counters from Experiment 1 and regenerate.
Yeah, so this card could eventually get huge and just have regeneration on it. That text isn't as relevant, but it is kind of cool.
But it's an impactful 1-drop that you can play that's not totally embarrassing later in the game.
Yeah.
This next card is extremely good. It's extremely good in so many decks. I would just consider playing this in like all your green decks. Go ahead.
It's Gyre/Gyre. Is it Gyre? I think it's Gyre.
I don't know.
Gyre Sage. I'm betting my money's on it. It's a creature elf druid. Again, elf and is very important here. It has Evolve as well, so it gets bigger if creature with bigger toughness or power comes in. It's a 1/2, and it has the ability tap, add green to your mana pool for each +1/+1 counter on Gyre Sage. So it essentially has Rishkar's ability at 1 counter, and then when Rishkar adds more stuff onto it, it just gets better.
Think if you play did we agree on Gyre or Gyre?
I'm saying Gyre.
Think if you play Gyre Sage, it's almost certainly Gyre because we've come down on one side.
I'm not Googling how to pronounce Gyre right now. Wait. Gyre. Thank you, Internet.
How? Never doubted you for a second.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah, no, I always knew.
Let's go get Gyros after this at the Greek restaurant.
Gyro dreams of
Gyro dreams of heroes.
So Gyre Sage. Gyre? Is that what
Gyre, yeah.
Okay.
No, Gyre.
Okay, so Gyre Sage. Think of if you play Gyre Sage on turn 2. So I'm going to read the text again. You can tap it and add green to your mana pool for each 1/1 counter on it, and it has Evolve. For each 1/1 counter on it. It's not because if it has 1, it doesn't tap for 1. If it has, or it does. But if it has 2, it taps for 2 green mana. So if you play Gyre Sage on turn 2, then Rishkar, the Evolve trigger goes on, Gyre Sage gets a counter. Then Rishkar puts his counter on Gyre Sage. So Gyre Sage is already tapping for 2 mana. This card is extremely good.
I like that card a lot. I like this one a lot, too.
Yeah, this is one of the new cards from Aether Revolt.
Aether Revolt just keeps on giving. So many good cards from this set for
Yeah,
this.
and there's a lot of cards from Aether Revolt and Kaladesh in this deck. Metallic Mimic. So it's a 2-mana artifact creature shapeshifter. It's a 2/1. As Metallic Mimic enters the battlefield, name or choose a creature type. What did we say was the important creature type before you had?
They live in the woods. They have pointy ears. Elves.
It's so you choose elves, or you don't have to. You can also choose servos at certain points.
Yeah.
Metallic Mimic is the chosen type in addition to its other types. And then each other creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So you play Metallic Mimic on 2, you name Elf, now Rishkar comes in and automatically gets a counter from Metallic Mimic. And then you can place the counter from Rishkar on the Mimic, and if you played a 1-drop on the 1-drop, and now you've got 3 creatures that tap for mana because Mimic's adding extra counters. Also, Mimic adds extra counters to all the elves in the deck, and it's not like there's a ton of them, but there are enough that it's totally worth it.
Yeah, and like you said, servos later on as well.
Yep.
There are cards that generate a lot of low mini 1/1s, and Metallic Mimic, it's a card that, because it's a shapeshifter, you can play it at different parts of the game and have it impact because you know in your hand or in your command zone what you want to affect with it.
Yeah. So that's sort of the curve out. You really want to play a 1-drop, then a 2-drop, then Rishkar, or at least a 2-drop, then Rishkar. You really want to have 2 creatures that you created turned into mana dorks on turn 3. And that was the second realization about the deck, which is that turn 4, if you do it right, you're always going to have 6 or 7 mana available. So you sort of skip your turn 4 or 5, and you jump right to 6. Because if you play Rishkar and put 1 counter on one thing, then you play a land the next turn, you got 4 lands and 2 mana dorks, that's 6 mana. So I really paid attention to the 6 and 7 drop slots, because that was kind of the play sequencing I saw from the deck. So what did I want to accomplish with those slots? How did I want to have really big turns? And I wanted to really set myself up on turn 4 for the rest of the game, protect myself from the things the deck's weak to, set other decks back, just set up some sort of good engine going. So the next category is called 6 and 7 drops.
On turn 4/5.
Yeah. The first one is, go ahead.
Soul of New Phyrexia. Put this on my top 10 artifacts list. 6 mana, 6/6 artifact creature avatar with trample, but 2 abilities on it. They both cost 5 mana. The first is permanence you control for 5 mana. Gain indestructible until end of turn. And then you can pay 5 mana to exile Soul of New Phyrexia if it's in your graveyard. And you get the same ability of making a permanence control gain indestructible. So it's anti-board wipe ×2 if you have 10 mana.
Yep. So,
but even just ×1 is usually enough.
Usually good enough, yeah. And like I said, one of the things the deck is very scared of is board wipes. So getting the soul out early, having it there as a means to save yourself from board wipes is very good. This next card, we just keep talking about it.
Yeah, this deck could overperform like crazy.
Yeah, it's insanely good in this deck. It's Zendikar Resurgent. So it's 5 green for an enchantment. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So if you get this card out on turn 4, which is very possible, I don't know if I did on game nights, but if you play like Endless One into Metallic Mimic into Rishkar, turn 4 you're playing Zendikar Resurgent, and you are off to the races. You doubled the amount of mana your lands produce, and every time you play a creature, you're drawing a card.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an extremely good card.
I mean, the fact that you just get to keep making stuff and you're fueling yourself to do more stuff. It pairs very well with this next card, which is all about, if you can tell, Zendikar Resurgence was about ramping you and also giving you card advantage. Same with this next card. It is Rishkar's Expertise. It is our preview card from Aether Revolt. 4 green for a sorcery. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Guaranteed they're going to be pretty big because you're putting +1/+1 counters and everything. And then you may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. You draw like 5 cards, and you get to choose from your whole hand a card with CMC 5 or less, and just play it for free.
Woo! It's insane. You have these turn 4s where even modestly, if Rishkar's your biggest creature and it's a 3/3, you draw 3 cards, play a 5-drop.
Yeah, it's pretty nutty.
Those are insane turns. So Rishkar's Expertise. That's a staple. That's a commander staple. I think it's going to go in almost all the green decks. It's very good.
Too.
Every time I've had it in my hand and played it, I've just been like, this card's insane. Like, I just draw 4 cards and then I still play something awesome?
Yeah. Like, usually you have to choose, okay, do I want to harmonize and draw this turn, or do I want to play this 4-drop?
Yep.
I guess we'll draw cards. Rishkar, you get a little bit of everything.
I'll
with
just
those
do
cards.
both of those things.
Why not both? You know? Why not?
So the next card is... Are we worried about lighting here?
Yeah, I'm like, if you can see me in the video, I'm like dipping in and out of light. Here, I'll stand over here.
Okay. I don't even know.
No, it's fine.
I think we just leave it real cozy like this. Yeah. Hey, everybody.
It's so that the sun's not burning my face off.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
The face comes off.
I want to take his face.
The last one we're going to talk about in this category of 6 and 7 drops on turn 4 is Bane of Progress.
Great card.
4 green for a 2/2 creature elemental, but when Bane of Progress enters the battlefield, destroy all artifacts and enchantments.
You can just stop there. Oh, wait, there's more.
It would still be great if it just did that, right?
Exactly.
But no, you put a +1/+1 counter on Bane of Progress for each permanent destroyed this way.
Synergy with
Let
the
me
deck.
just say what happens when you're the green deck, what everybody else does for the first 4 turns. Oh, they play mana rocks and stuff.
Yeah.
Boom.
Bane of Progress.
Boom. So
On
you just
curve
end
is
up
great.
with like a 6/6 or a 7/7 maybe, and you set them back. You know, they're all doing stuff, and they're like, okay, my next turn, my 4th or 5th turn is the turn when I've got 6 or 7 mana. Nope.
Yeah. Really good card.
Yeah.
Big fan of that guy.
All right, let's move to the next category.
Oh, yes. This is very quickly, this is becoming my favorite category in a lot of decks because I just find that these cards blow people out of the water.
Yeah, they just don't expect them. They're not ready for them.
Yeah.
It's like that, what was it, Second Sunrise?
Second Sunrise. You played the second card we're going to talk about here
Yeah.
in the game nights too, and to great effect. So this is Protect My Board. Stuff that essentially says, hey, you're trying to do stuff to my board. Heck nah. Soul of New Phyrexia did the same thing, which is making your permanents indestructible. A new card from Aether Revolt is Heroic Intervention. 1 in the green. You get to summon a Johnny to stop something bad from happening, which is an instant that says permanent you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is the double whammy. This sometimes could be a 1-for-1. They point something at a creature of yours. You just use this to give it hexproof. Or this could save your entire board. Not just any part of your board, every permanent. So lands included. This stops mass land destruction, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, whatever. Unless it says exile, Heroic Intervention is going to stop it from happening.
Yeah, or -X. But those are those happen, but they're corner case. Yeah, this card's just really good, and at only 2 mana, it's not super hard to hold it open, especially when your guys tap for mana.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the next one is Inspiring Call. This card is even better. This card's ridiculous. So in this deck, it's 2 and a green for an instant. Draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it.
What?
Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn.
Nice.
So a lot of times this is save you from a board wipe, draw 4 or 5 cards.
Yeah, this was nuts when you played it.
Yeah.
It definitely saved you.
It was still pretty early in the game too. I want to say it was turn 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It caught you right up though, which was
Oh
great.
yeah. Oh yeah. It was like refill my hand, blank. I think your removal spell, your board wipe. Here we go. The next category is Stack Those Counters
Stack them up.
to the ceiling. So this is just the things that are adding more counters to your guys. So Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, 1 green for a Planeswalker Nissa with 3 loyalty. Your +1 is put a 0/1 plant creature token onto the battlefield. Your -2 is put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. And the -7 doesn't matter too much, but you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of lands you control.
Notably, you can do this immediately she comes out. So for 3 mana, you get an effect that says that sorcery speed, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and Nissa sticks around. Otherwise, you're making the 0/1s and ticking her up to put the +1/+1 counters on eventually.
Yeah, and actually making the 0/1s is not bad, because if you have other effects that are going to put a +1/+1 counter on, or the next turn you are, then you're basically making Llanowar Elves, which is a totally different thing for a +1.
Yeah, it's in fact, it's kind of like
Freyalise.
Freyalise, yeah. She makes like little guys that can tap for mana. Nissa can just do this to your whole board at -2. So at sorcery speed, you could potentially go from like 5 mana to 10, depending on how many little guys you have on the field.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
The next card is another new card from Aether Revolt. It's Ridgescale Tusker.
It's a mythic uncommon, as they like to refer to
The
it.
budget Verdurous Gearhulk. Actually, I think a little better than Verdurous Gearhulk in this deck.
Yes.
3 green for a 5/5 creature beast. When Ridgescale Tusker enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each other creature you control. So it Nissa's, but it's also a 5/5.
Yeah. And it's great. Again, this just blows up fast. Like, again, if you have a lot of tokens out, you have a lot of guys that don't have the counters. They're like, they don't tap for mana or whatever. Ridgescale Tusker and Nissa are both ways to just make your mana.
Yeah, both of those give you these turns where you didn't look that scary. They're like, oh, only 2 of your guys tap for mana. You didn't find anything. And then you go, but you've got 5 or 6 creatures, and you go, boom, play one of them, turn all those guys into mana dorks, and now all of a sudden, oh, you have 12 mana. I thought you only had 6.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
This last one's great. Hardened Scales.
Pick up this card because it seems to be going in every deck.
Overperformer for sure. Green, and that's the thing, it costs green mana for an enchantment. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters will be placed on a creature you control, that many +1 that many +1/+1/+1 counters are placed on it instead. So Rishkar puts on 1 counter, Hardened Scales is like, no, I'm going to harden those scales. You get 2 +1/+1 counters.
So if you played on turn 1, then a 2-drop, now when you play Rishkar, yeah, you get 4 +1/+1 counters as long as you spread them out, you know.
Yeah. And that's the other part about this deck is you're making a lot of mana, but you're also making buff creatures that are hard to get through.
Yeah, so eventually you're like, oh, I don't need mana. I just attack you.
Yeah, and you need to finish big, as our last category here is.
Finish big.
With this great card. Everyone loves this one.
We're not going to hear anything about this card. Well, it didn't win that game, so we're probably fine. It's Triumph of the Hordes. It's 2 green for a sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1, gain trample, and infect. The trample part's the part that really is just mean.
That's why this works. That's why this usually wins, is because you can block the creatures, but like, sorry, you're still getting in 5 infect here because of trample, 3 there, 2 there, you die.
Yeah, there's certainly turn like 4s where you could possibly kill people, because if you play, let's say you play Endless One into Metallic Mimic into Rishkar, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have enough power on the board at that point, because you'll have 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 from Triumph of the Hordes to, if nobody's got a blocker, and it's turn 4, sometimes they don't. So sometimes you can just be real mean. Whoop. But the good thing about Triumph of the Hordes is really just those later turns when, like we said, you've got 6 or 7 creatures and they've all got a couple +1/+1 counters on them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people can't even chump block that well now because you got trample.
It's true.
Oh, this card actually super good in the deck because it does 2 things you want to do. So go ahead.
Yeah, this is actually a commander-only card from Commander 2015.
Yeah. It hasn't seen a lot of play, but in this deck, it's like near perfect.
Yeah, Great Oak Guardian, 5 and a green for a creature tree folk with flash. So you can cast this anytime you can cast an instant. It has reach. It's a 4/5. When Great Oak Guardian enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Untap them. So it's kind of like Palinchron for your creatures almost, except you do every creature that you have on taps.
And they get bigger. I mean, you're going to choose yourself, obviously, for this one. So you can tap your creatures to cast Great Oak Guardian because it will untap them. So now that they've gotten bigger, they can now attack.
And you can float the mana that you're not using either.
Yep.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, this card, very, very, very good. And again, you can always just use it to, maybe you've got enough creatures that it makes sense that you just want to untap them or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, and the last card... It's funny
because...
putting
some real winners in here, literally.
It's funny because I'm on the, listen, slow down, let's not talk about banning stuff train. And then I did the thing that's the most likely to have people call for its banning.
Yeah.
It's Paradox Engine. This is the perfect deck for it. It's 5 mana for a legendary artifact. Whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents you control. We said on the Commander Summit that it doesn't go in every deck, but it definitely goes in decks like this where you're turning all your stuff that's not lands you're making it all tap for mana.
Yeah. So they all untap anytime you cast a spell. You combine this with Zendikar Resurgent, you cast a spell, draw a card, untap everything. You're probably going to be able to play that card and then untap everything.
And then draw.
And then you're literally adding mana to each time because if you're tapping for more than the card costs, then you have a little extra mana left over when everything untaps. So
yeah, let's say you have 6 creatures with 1/1 counters on it. You tap all 6 of them. So you have 6 mana in your mana pool. Then you play a 4-drop. Well, Paradox Engine untaps all your stuff, so you've got 2 mana left.
Yeah.
So if you do that again, you can just actually gain mana. It's crazy. This card's crazy in this deck. It leads to these turns, and you have to have some card draw with it. But it can lead to these turns where you sort of play your entire deck.
Yeah, it's essentially what you're doing by the end there. You were just dumping out your deck because you kept drawing from Zendikar Resurgent, playing a creature because this deck is heavy on creatures, and just whoop, 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 just going off.
Yeah, and eventually you find like Rishkar's expertise, and you play that. Now now you draw like 9 cards, and then you're like, well, I can never run out of cards because everyone, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
This next card I didn't get out, but I believe it is extremely good in the deck. Mm-hmm. It's Wirewood Symbiote.
Oh, yeah.
This is an Eternal Masters
reprint
draft hero. It's 1 green mana for a creature insect. It's a 1/1. It says return an elf you control to its owner's hand, untap target creature. Activate this ability only once each turn. So this allows you to return Rishkar to your hand and then play it again to put more 1/1 counters out. Also, there are other elves in the deck. It also allows you to untap a creature. So you can do things like tap Rishkar for mana, tap another creature for mana. There's 2 mana in your mana pool. Now use Wirewood's ability to bring Rishkar back to your hand and untap the creature. that you tapped.
And
play Rishkar.
Yeah.
So
and then add more counters to more creatures that can tap now. And so you're like playing Rishkar for almost very, very close to free, essentially.
So, and there's other onto the battlefield effects on certain other creatures. So it's just a good one.
You can sometimes untap other people's creatures too, actually.
True. You could just that's true because it's once each turn.
Yeah.
Also, if you get Vidalcan Ori out, which is in the deck, then you can start doing it on my turn, on your turn, on Jimmy's turn.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, this card did work.
Animation module, another overperformer in the deck.
Another 1-drop
from Kaladesh. It costs 1 mana for an artifact. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are placed on the permanent you control, you may pay 1 generic mana. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So anytime Rishkar's ability adds something, you can pay an extra mana and you get tokens. Now, you can also tap this for 3 and tap it. Choose a counter on target permanent or player. Give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. So you can make your guys buffer as well, and then that triggers the first part of this ability because the +1/+1 counter is placed on something, and you can pay 1, make another servo artifact creature token.
Yeah, basically, if something has a 1/1 counter on your board, you can always pay 4 mana and tap the animation module to add a counter and make a servo.
Yeah, absurd.
Yeah, but there's so many things like Ridgescale Tuskers, Rishkar himself, Verdur's Gearhulk, stuff like that are adding counters that you're just often getting little servos extra. And this deck wants a lot of just, they just want a lot of expendable creatures laying around that they can put counters on.
Yeah, and so the Metallic Mimic works great with these as well. Makes them all into 2/2s that are now mana dorks.
Yeah, that's the reason you might sometimes say servo with Metallic Mimic, which I failed to do in the episode, but I should have done.
Oh yeah,
but I didn't. I don't think I knew at that point that it was gonna.
You didn't see the line.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that I was going to quite go off with Metallic Mimic. Animation module with Paradox Engine, pretty good too.
All right, so how does the deck play? What's the deck week 2? You got to test it out a couple of times. Maybe you've played it since then.
Yeah, well, it's really fun. And this is one of the reasons that I've been moving towards lower curve decks is because you just get to do stuff. Like, think of how many 1-drops we talked about. Wirewood Symbiote, Animation Module, Hardened Scales, Endless One. Like, you're playing something on 1, 2, 3 every game. So you don't have these games where it didn't feel like you did much. You always do stuff. Now, sometimes somebody goes turn 4 Wrath of God. Yeah. And you go, well.
Why?
But I did do stuff back then.
You're just like, not like this, please.
Not like this.
Not like this.
So it's super fun to play. You just got a lot of stuff you're doing. You always have plays. You have tons of mana. But it is creature based. So it is one of these really fragile decks.
Yeah. It is fragile, but turns out when you're just able to have an explosive turn, doesn't matter.
Sometimes you're just like, I don't know, it's turn 7. I'm just going to play every card in my deck.
Yeah. And it's
cool.
And
one of those is going to be Concordant Crossroads, so it can attack right now. Like, it can have those kinds of turns for sure. I mean, I think it's very powerful. But it's got some gaping holes. So if people have removal, because sometimes you can just get rid of Rishkar, and now all of a sudden it turns off all your other creatures' ability to tap for mana, and that will turn off a lot of what's happening too.
A lot of people are afraid to remove a 2/2 because they're like, whatever, it's a 2/2. It's like, this card's closer to an enchantment at this point than a 2/2, and it is important to remove it, especially because it takes someone from like 5 mana to 8 or to 9 all of a sudden. So very, very powerful indeed. I could also see like if it's like 2 out of 3 things have to go right for the deck to work. Let's say you have some of the parts, but you don't have card draw, then you're just done. Or you have some of the parts, but you don't have the right amount. Well, you'll always have ramp, which is nice. You always have one of the 3 things you sort of need to go off.
Yeah, that's why you can sort of there's a lot of card draw in the deck because I just wanted to make sure like the velocity of it's very high because you never want to be like, I can tap for 12, 15 mana, but I have nothing to spend that on.
Yeah.
Anyway, deck's very fun.
Yeah, very fun, very powerful, very explosive too, especially when you get Paradox Engine out. In a deck like this, when you have mana dorks around or creatures that can tap for mana, Paradox Engine is remove on site, 100%.
Oh yeah, I think if anybody puts it in their deck, you have to remove it on site. You have to assume that they put it in their deck because their deck is good for it. So
I'm good for it.
Yeah, listen, it's an extremely good card.
Yeah. And remember, you can check out the deck list for this deck and the next one we're going to deck tech in the description below the videos, as well as on collected.company, which is our new magic hub for this stuff. And our editor for the show is, I'm just kidding.
You can also find them on the Game Nights episode.
Yes.
Along with the other decks, the Kari Zev deck and the Yahenni deck.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this deck.
So
as
sweet.
Much as I did, my deck was fine, and I liked it, and it was fun. In fact, I think I would have liked it a lot more, except for Wes's deck just looked so awesome.
Yeah. Well, there was one person at the table that always had 7 cards in his hand.
And 17 million things on the table, and he was just doing stuff. We got to apologize to Wes because of scheduling, and we kind of messed up. We forgot we were supposed to do this episode.
He's in the middle of a move as well.
Yeah, so we would really like to have good English, Josh. We would really have liked to get him on this episode because he's a good friend of ours, been in our play group, and he built an awesome deck. So
yeah. He's also a game designer, like we talked about in Game Nights.
At Riot, on the biggest video game in the world, although not anymore. He's changing gigs.
Yeah, but he's very good at what he does, and so he built SRAM Senior Edificer. And in fact, when I asked him, like, hey, we're going to do this thing, he's like, oh, I already built a SRAM deck.
You were like, perfect.
Because he liked the card so much. And so SRAM Senior Edificer, let's read him, is 1 and a white for a legendary creature, Dwarf Advisor. He's a 2/2. And whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. And I'm going to read the flavor text here because it does matter. Stram says, as this conflict grows, it gets harder to prevent the city from breaking down. How much longer can we keep this machinery balanced?
Oh, I like your SRAM.
Yeah, so he's like got a lot of machines in front of him. So what do we think about this guy? Is he powerful? Yes. He is card draw in white. Hard, easy card draw in white if you build around it.
He's already my favorite mono white commander.
Yeah. I mean, Avacyn's great too, but like SRAM is just there to get you value. Why did Wes choose to build this deck? Well, Wes is a guy that loves value. He loves to make optimal plays and to draw a lot of cards. All of the decks I've ever seen Wes play can draw cards like crazy. So in this case, he has the choice. Either you're playing an enchantment aura, an equipment, or a vehicle, and you're going to draw a card.
Another thing, and I didn't really think of this until I saw Wes play the deck, which is that when you have that amount of stuff, there's a lot of tricky things you can do as far as like a lot of decisions because, well, I have 10 equipment out. Right. I have 2 creatures. Which equipment in which combination goes on which creature, and then what do I do?
Yeah.
That's totally so Wes, and he's thinking of all these different lines that I'm like, wow, I never would have thought of that.
Yeah. So the plan for the deck is very simple. If you put the text draw a card on every single card in the deck, it's going to be a good thing. So that's, perhaps unknowingly or with full knowledge, Wes crafted a deck that runs as smooth as SRAM's machinery. So it's like a very Vorthos-y deck without him realizing it. Or maybe, that's what SRAM is. So the plan here is very simple. You play SRAM on turn 2, and you just create a powerful, ever-growing, and ever-replenishing board state to strike with lethal force at any chance. So it's kind of like somewhat Voltron-y, somewhat just like board swarmy as well. It's got a lot of different ways to reduce your life total down. It's primarily based in combat. And it's really interesting because it's time to talk about the stats. Mana ramp, 2. There's 2 cards that ramp him in this deck.
That was anticlimactic after the stats.
So he straight up has like a soul ring and like some other stuff, and there are some cards that reduce equipment costs and stuff. However, for the most part, there is no ramp in this deck, and in all honesty, it didn't actually need it. So,
he has a low mana count too because the deck is very low curve. Because you want the artifacts and everything to be cheap because you want to play a lot of them because they're going to draw you cards. So.
Yeah, and Wes essentially was able to always do what he wanted, always play as much as he wanted because it was low cost and he had a lot of cards that reduced costs of like equipment and stuff. Card draw, I put 99, which isn't true. In reality, it's closer to 4 to 5-ish. And the card draw isn't even like draw some cards, because SRAM itself is a card draw engine. He just didn't focus that much on it. The other cards are like Skull Clamp or Smuggler's Copter because you're looting with it, and like Mask of Memory, so it's built onto an equipment. So it's not straight like play a spell, draw some cards. It always has something else tied to it. There are 2 tutors in here, Stoneforge Mystic, Stone Hero Giant, just to grab out equipment.
Makes sense.
Single target removal, he has your swords and dispatch package in this case because Path has a downside, but dispatch doesn't, and it's a ton of artifacts in this deck. And 2 board wipes. So I know Wes wanted to build this so that it wasn't super overpowered. I think if he wanted to, he could increase the board wipes to 6. He could put in more single target removal or more ways to sort of control the board.
Yeah, especially with some equipment, the board wipes are a lot better, right? Because it doesn't hit your equipment, then you replay SRAM and crew the equipment and put the equipment on, crew the vehicle, put some equipment on it. Like, you can sort of take advantage of board wipes in a way that I wouldn't suspect from just, before I saw the deck in action. But I think more board wipes would be good.
If you wanted to tune this deck up, for sure. But it still functioned, and it
the deck was still very good.
Smooth as butter.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the categories of stuff. The first is Killia / Voltron equipment. So this deck isn't necessarily Voltron, but it can be. For the most part, it's just it wants to hit you with stuff, and equipment is a big part of that. So you want to read this first one?
Umezawa's Jite. It's 2 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. By some accounts, the greatest single card in the history of limited play.
Especially now that it says draw a card on it.
Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage, put 2 charge counters on Umezawa's Jite. Remove a charge counter from Umezawa's Jite, and you can choose one. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or you gain 2 life. This, you know what? Every time you read this card, you just don't understand how good it is. You just have to see it in play before you realize it's just impossible to deal with. It kills stuff. If you block it, it can grow. It, once the GT's got a ton of counters on it, you're just like, you can't handle that card.
Can't handle it. Sometimes you just take counters off and give a creature -5/-5 and kill it. That has indestructible or whatever. It's like it just gets it done, and it's very cheap. 2 mana and 2 to equip. He also has the Sword of series. We're not going to read them off here. We're all very familiar with this. If you're watching on the podcast, you'll see all 3: Sword of Light and Shadow, Feast and Famine, Fire and Ice. Light and Shadow is great. It helps you get back some of your creatures.
Feast and Famine's the best one.
Feast and Famine is by far the best one. But even in a deck like this that doesn't need that much mana, they're all very powerful. And another card that is just sort of like hey, check it out. We're putting a lot of equipment on, especially in this deck, Golem Skin Gauntlets. It's a 1 mana artifact equipment that says draw a card on it now. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each equipment attached to it.
It's the cranial plating of equipment.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, cranial plating is an equipment.
That's right.
You know what I meant. You know what I meant.
You knew it. You know what I meant. Yeah, so I mean, obviously you can see here, these are all equipment meant to make your creatures pretty buff, pretty powerful, and have a lot of evasion because all the Sword of series have protections from different colors. So it's a great way to make sure your damage gets in. And obviously you don't need to put this on Sram either. There are a lot of other creatures in here. There are a lot of helper friends in the deck. And one of them, perhaps one of the most powerful cards in the deck. You want to read it?
Pure Steel Paladin. So this is the other card that's being paired with Sram in Modern for the Cheerios deck.
Oh, yeah.
It is white for a human knight, a 2/2. Whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So it's Sram.
Just for equipment.
Yep. But it also has Metalcraft. Equipment you control has equip 0 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. So you can just start willy-nilly moving your equipment from wherever you want, equip it to whoever you want. This is when it starts getting tricky because you can sort of move your equipment here, do something, move it over here, do something. This is part of that Modern deck that everyone's trying to mess around with.
Yeah, the reason that this is great too is like you want to spend your mana playing cards to draw cards and equipping stuff. Oftentimes Wes would have like 8 different equipment on the battlefield and equips none of them because he didn't want to pay those costs. He'd rather draw more cards out of his deck by playing equipment from his hand. So Pure Steel Paladin gets around that, and you also draw more cards now whenever you play equipment.
Yeah, you draw 2 if you're playing equipment. So
yeah, which is really, really nuts. So another helper friend is Leonin Shikari. It's 1 in a white for a creature cat soldier to 2/2 that says you may activate equip abilities anytime you could cast an instant. So
talk about getting tricky.
Yeah, if you have this and the other guy, you swing with 2 creatures, they block 1, you just swap all the equipment over immediately at instant speed and then just wreck them.
Or if you've got the swords out, you can use it as sort of a counter spell because they might point like a black spell at it. Well, Feast of Famine goes over and now protection from.
Yeah. So very good card. There's a few tutor helper friends. So like we said before, Stoneforge Mystic and Stonehero Giant, both similar cards in terms of they
go find specific equipment.
Find equipment out of your deck. And then there's also the Tajnar Swordsmith, which I think is really good in this deck because you can be like, oh, I'm playing against a red-black player. I need to get this sword out. Tajnar Swordsmith lets you pay extra mana when it enters the battlefield to search your library for an equipment cost with that mana cost and immediately put it onto the battlefield. So pretty good. You're not paying for the cost to put it into your hand. It goes on the battlefield, and you are, maybe you can equip it for 0 at instant speed at the same time.
Yeah, it's tutor and play. Always very strong.
Yeah. So, of course, SRAM lets you draw cards when you play in a vehicle as well. Wes doesn't have many vehicles in this deck. He does have a couple of them. One of them, very important, very powerful, is the Heart of Kirin.
Very expensive these days because it's standard.
That's true. I think he may have opened it at a draft or something and was just like, cool, I'm good.
So Heart of Kirin is 2 mana for a legendary artifact vehicle. It's a 4/4 with flying and vigilance. It has crew 3, so you can tap any number of creatures you control with power 3 or more, and then the vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. You may remove a loyalty counter from a planeswalker you control rather than pay Heart of Kiran's crew cost, which is probably not going to come up very
Yeah,
often.
not very relevant here.
Yeah, so it's just the vehicles were a lot better than I thought, especially the flyers.
Yeah, this is why it's big. It's because it's a flyer.
Yeah, so you could get in, and they were sort of hard to get rid of because they're not creatures on, your opponent's turns.
Right.
So they dodge board wipes and things like that.
Yeah, the only thing would be sometimes you'd have to waste mana to equip it
Yeah.
onto there. But if you have your Pure Steel Paladin, then you activate this thing. and
Slide it over.
Crew 3 doesn't even matter at this point because you can just equip a creature to be big enough, slide all the equipment over, bang, hit you for a bunch, slide it back over to something else. And at the end of the turn, it's no longer a creature.
Yep.
Same goes for Sky Sovereign, console flagship. You guys have seen this big guy around if you've played, I don't know, any limited. Hopefully you haven't seen this thing.
It's so good in
So,
limited.
yeah, and it turns out it's still pretty decent in EDH2 because it's a 5-mana 6/5 flyer with crew 3, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. So even just as like a straight single target removal spell, sometimes all you need is lightning bolt damage to kill something important. Like in Azusa, Lost but
It's
Seeking.
terrifying once
Bye-bye.
it gets out because you usually look around at like a lot of your board and you're like, well,
Yeah.
just for free, he can just off like half my stuff.
Doesn't even need to attack that person to
Yep.
do it. It can just target anything on the board or a planeswalker even too.
Yep. It's actually way better than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
When he got it out, I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
That thing's gonna do some work.
And it almost did.
The next category is Cheerios.
Yeah, so these are the 0-mana cycler equipment. When I talked to Wes about it, he's like, yeah, I have all these cards that say 0-mana draw a card in them. I'm like, what are you talking about? Turns out Wizards has made a lot of 0-mana cost equipment over the years. I'm just going to read them all out because they're very, very similar. A Quarter's Shield and Cathar's Shield do the exact same thing. Here's the thing, like you play SRAM, this is just a free card out of your hand because you draw another card off the top.
Yep.
It's really, really crazy when you watch Wes go off. Just play a card, draw a card,
I
play a
think in
card, draw
both
a card,
games,
play a card, draw a card.
he went play SRAM, play a 0-dropped equipment, draw a card on turn 2. In one of the games, he played 2 0-drop equipments. So on turn 2, he had 4 permanents in play, had already drawn 3 cards. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's also Paradise Mantle. This actually has a little bit more utility because you can use this to tap the creature for mana. And so it has a equip cost of 1. However, if this is reduced, then every creature becomes like a Rishkar deck where they can all tap for mana by just swapping it around.
Yeah, it's a crypt cost of 1, and it turns him into a Birds of Paradise, basically.
Yeah, which is really interesting. And then there's Spider Silk Net, which just basically gives a creature reach and like an extra amount of toughness.
Most of these are just in there because they cost 0. So it's evening out your deck.
Yeah.
Right, 0-mana cantrips just make your deck smaller, basically, because every time you draw them, they don't count as a card. But the upside is that sometimes you do equip and use the thing, so it does have, some functional use.
And it's really
later in
tough
the
to
game.
block something and kill it when it's got like 20 toughness because of all these weird 0-drop equipment.
Yep.
And of course, the enchantment auras in this deck that will allow Wes to draw even more creatures with SRAM. Angelic Destiny and Conviction are both cards that are repeatable, essentially. Conviction you can bounce to your hand. Angelic Destiny just makes a creature into a Voltron creature. You see this in Voltron decks all the time. And when the creature dies, you return the Angelic Destiny to your hand. So you're able to play it again if SRAM's out.
It also gives him +4/+4 flying and first strike.
And makes him an angel.
So they're,
Yeah.
they're also smashing people until you kill them and you're like, ah, crap, he still has that card.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Finally, a card that I've been wanting to see played for a very long time, Sigarda's Aid. You want to read this one?
Yep. 1 white mana for an enchantment. You may cast aura and enchantment spells as though they had flash.
And equipment spells.
Sorry, aura and equipment spells as though they had flash. Whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to target creature you control. That's
What?
without paying the equip cost.
Yeah. So this card is obviously awesome, and you can play this on turn 1. You can play it's like Concurrent Crossroads. The ability is incredibly powerful, and you can play it very easily because it's just a 1-mana enchantment.
It's so good in this deck, too, because, a lot of those 0-cost artifacts, they're sort of mitigated by the fact that they have a high equip cost.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get Sigarda's 8 out, you play a 0-cost artifact, and it just equips to the creature, and you drew a card. And if, if it's another one, you just do that again.
Which is insane because at instant speed, too, this could be a combat trick.
Yep.
You swing at someone, I don't block, play 3 things, equip it all at the same time, I just hit you for lethal.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah, so Sigarda's Aid, really cool card. I think this is one of those cards that will eventually see a lot of EDH play in the long run. So again, there's also the Protect My Stuff category. In this case, it's sort of the Get My Stuff Back, because the one thing that this deck is weak to is mass artifact removal.
Yeah, it really is an artifact deck. You board wipes that hit creatures aren't that bad for it. But man, if you
Yeah.
can destroy all artifacts, it's just like, it's not that every time that happened to Wes, or if it happened, oh, spoiler, he still had a million cards in hand. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm done. It's just like, oh, my board presence, I got to rebuild it.
And he would do so within a turn or two easily without even breaking a sweat, which is pretty crazy. So, second Sunrise, 1 white for an instant. Each player returns to the battlefield all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards in his or her graveyard that were put there from the graveyard battlefield this turn. So he's basically able to recover everything that gets wiped out, including creatures and enchantments and lands too. So if someone did a board wipe for just creatures, he could also still play Second Sunrise, but it does affect every player. So in this case, usually if it's all artifacts, Wes wants them all back.
Yep.
And then there's Open the Vaults, which is a bit more expensive mana-wise, but still pretty good.
Yeah, it's 4 white for a sorcery. Return all artifact and enchantment cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So it just brings it all back. Didn't have to die that turn.
Yeah. Which is pretty cool. It's 6 mana, affects everyone. But again, these effects usually do that. But in Wes's deck's case, he's going to be bringing back like 15 to 20 cards. You'll maybe bringing back 3.
Yep.
So pretty good.
Pretty good.
All right, let's talk about some of the overperformers in the deck. Sram, Senior Edificer, is the single most overperforming card I think I've ever seen in my life at this point. Seriously, I didn't expect this to happen when I played. I was sitting there being like, holy moly, even if Wes doesn't win, he's won in my heart.
The deck looks so fun to play. SRAM's sort of the center of it. Man, drawing a card for every card you play is just awesome.
Just awesome.
Just awesome.
Pure Steel Paladin, obviously a huge overperformer. The fact that you can equip at 0.
Well, it's just because it's SRAM number 2.
SRAM number 2 as well. Oh, boy. And then we didn't talk about this in the vehicle section, but Smuggler's Copter. You're drawing a lot of cards. Smuggler's Copter is a way to both draw more cards on offense and defense. Very cheap to crew, easy, very evasive, very cheap to play as well, and also will let you loot away stuff that you don't want. So
yeah, that card really overperformed because I wouldn't think Smuggler's Copter, and I don't think we even talked about it much as a card that even belonged in EDH. But it's just so efficient, and the looting's really important. Just because this deck wants to churn through and find its really important pieces.
Yeah. So the deck plays smooth as butter.
Smooth as butter.
You know, if you really want to have someone have fun playing a deck for the first time and not really familiar with EDH, you could give them a SRAM deck and they would have a blast, I think.
I mean, you're going to do a lot of stuff. I'm not saying you'll win necessarily, but you won't feel like at the end of the game, well, I didn't get to do anything.
Yeah, definitely. You'll never feel that way at the end of a game.
You will have played more cards than everybody else, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is the second question we always ask is, was the deck weak to? And I said artifact removal, but at the same time, not really.
Yeah, I think it is still weak to it, but not in the way of a lot of decks because a lot of decks just can't recover that fast.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times Wes, all of his artifacts would get removed, and like you said, he'd go, you know, play an artifact, draw a card, play an artifact, draw a card, play an artifact, draw a card, play an artifact, draw a card. He's right, sort of not quite where he was, but close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the deck's actually weak to the same things that all Voltron decks are weak to, which is just the fact that the format's very tough on Voltron decks because they get out to these fast starts. This deck gets out to very fast starts. They start, you know, attacking and swinging, and then they can maybe take somebody out or get somebody low. But then the other person, or maybe they even do that to 2 players, but the last player sort of gets their mana set up, starts playing their really big stuff, and they just kind of outclass the Voltron deck at that point because all that stuff you're drawing that was good in the early game, well, it's not the early game anymore. And so it feels like it's got sort of typical Voltron deck weaknesses.
Yeah, it's a tough one. There are a couple of creatures in here that make low tokens and stuff, so you can kind of go wide, but that's not the point of the deck. And it's going to be tough because when you're spending so much of your deck just built on drawing you more cards, you're often drawing into cards that draw you cards as opposed to cards that will win you the game.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a tough balance here. I think Wes did strike a nice one, and it was great to see on camera. It was really fun to watch. I mean, you edited it. You know, you probably smiled the whole time too, I'm sure.
I smiled the whole time when we were playing. I was like, man, I wish I was playing that deck.
Yeah.
I will say that the way the deck's set up, because of all the cantripping and the card drawing, it does mitigate one of the downsides of Voltron, which is that sometimes in Voltron you stack 4 or 5 things on one creature, and you know, even though some of it protects it and everything else, something happens and then you lose all those cards at once. And then in a normal Voltron deck, you might not have 7 cards in your hand because not all those cards drew you cards. You might have 2 or 3, and it can feel like, well, I'm done. Yeah. Whereas SRAM, I mean, literally, I don't think there's a point in any of the games where Wes doesn't have 7 cards in hand.
Yeah,
like
he was discarding 2 very often.
I think most turns, he was discarding a card. He was discarding cards. So
All right.
Super, super fun.
Very fun. All right, to the listeners, asking you all a question. What's your favorite legendary from Ether Revolt that you've seen in action? Don't say Paradox Engine.
It was a legendary, isn't it?
It isn't legendary, is it? It is legendary. Oh, thank goodness. Don't say it.
Don't say
We all
it.
know when it's an action. Action. Just tell us. I don't care. I want to know the coolest stories, whether it's a creature or one of the artifacts. Let us know. If it's the Hope of Girapur, have you seen the Hope of Girapur deck yet? I would love to see
I haven't
one.
seen that deck yet, but from what I've seen, SRAM's the best.
Yeah, SRAM's the best.
All right. Make sure to visit cardkingdom.com/commandzone.
Pick up your SRAMs.
Pick up your SRAMs. Pick up your, I almost said Masters of Modern Masters 2017. The other one's a podcast, which is our sister podcast, and we'll talk about that later. You're going to want a copy of ZUR. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to want...
Now at a new reduced price because it's being reprinted. Bing.
You're going to want to draft that set, too. Those sets are always super fun to draft, so...
Yeah. Even just buying like a couple of packs to have when the draft comes around. I know that the boxes are now on pre-sale now.
Yep.
I don't know if it will be by the time this episode goes around, but you should still check it out. All of the previews are coming out this week, so it's going to be a big hype time for all of that. Just make sure you pay attention to cardkingdom.com/commandzone to find out when they have new deals up, when they're putting stuff up for sale. It's just good to know.
All right, time for the end step where we talk about something cool outside the world of magic.
Do you have anything?
I could have something.
Like, just show me what you got.
Show me what you got. I'm gonna revisit our New Year's resolution.
Oh yeah, but I don't know if you guys have noticed. If you're paying attention, Josh has been killing it, man. Look at these biceps.
So that's what I'm gonna say is because a lot of people have been noticing, especially last episode. I must for whatever reason. I've lost a bunch of weight. And I've been getting in shape. And the best thing about it actually has been we've gotten numerous emails, people message me on our Discord server, comments, telling their stories of how they've gotten in shape and the things they've done, which is really inspiring. So I hope people keep doing that. I love hearing the stories of how people how much weight they've dropped, how they did it, what encouraged them to stay, on their program or get on their program, and just all the incredible gains and goals that people have been able to achieve and reach. That is just great to hear. There's so many people out there who are, getting fit, and it's not easy. And it's, a lot of these people that messaged me were 300 pounds at one point. It's not like they were athletes their entire life, and they were still able to do amazing things, lose hundreds of pounds, some of them. So that is inspirational to me. I just want to say thank you to all you guys. Hopefully, I can be some kind of inspiration to you. You can lose weight. I did it. It's I'm not done. I'm going to keep going, but I'm just saying fitness is cool. Makes you feel good.
And
Thanks,
the Magic
everybody.
Man Sam ran the marathon recently too, so congrats to him.
That guy's in way better shape than I am.
Yeah, when you're running your marathon, dude.
Never. I don't think I could make like 5 miles. Like, how do you
Yeah.
run 26.5 miles or whatever?
I mean, everyone I've talked to or asked about it says it is a mental test as much as it is a physical one. Even more so mentally, I think.
I would fail that test.
Because your body can do it. It's just about whether or not your brain is going to be like, you should give up at some point.
I don't think
Don't
my
give
body
up.
can do it, Jimmy.
If you were being chased by like a tiger and you had to run 27 miles to save your life, you would be able to do it.
I don't know. After like 7 miles, I'm gonna be like, just eat me. I'm good. It's fine.
You start pouring sriracha sauce on yourself. You're like, yeah, it's good. I'm great. It tastes delicious. Get over here. Oh boy.
Well, hey, sriracha sauce, so bonus.
Bonus, yeah.
All right. Well, circling back around to something we already talked about, make sure to check out our sister podcast, The Masters of Modern. Alex Kessler, Ben Bateman. They talk about the modern format and all things competitive Magic. You can find them on Twitter at the MMcast. You can find them right next to us on collected.company, which is our Magic hub. You should definitely check those guys out if you haven't, because the set, Modern Masters.
Yeah.
It's about the format, Modern. So you're going to get all those cards, and you want to know what format they're in. Nobody knows that format better than Ben and Alex.
Yeah, and they'll tell which decks the cards go in, which ones are their favorite reprints out of all of it. They'll have a lot of insight about it that we do not have, so make sure to check them out. Our editor for the show is Terry Robertson. Thanks, Terry, for making the great video content that you can find at youtube.com/the Command Zone podcast. Last week, we had an episode with the Commander's Summit. We brought in 2 other podcasters from Commanderin and Commander's Brew.
That was fun.
So if you want to see all of our faces, we have that up right now. Again, youtube.com/the Command Zone podcast. And those videos also feature awesome living card animations from Geoffrey Palmer. Thanks, Geoffrey. You can find him online at Twitter at livingcardsmtg.
Also, make sure, check out the new game nights.
Yes, you get to see these decks in action, see the things that we were talking about happen in real life.
All right, everybody. I don't know if it's real. It's like real in the way that reality TV is real.
Yeah, exactly.
So not real.
Yeah, not real.
It's real. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.